Hi there, it's me, Annalisa Boyd, Orthodox Christian wife, mom to 10, bread baker, candy maker, self-proclaimed doula, accidental midwife, and the author of The Ascetic Lives of Mothers Hear Me, Special Agents of Christ, and creator of saintsbox.com. So today I'm going to do something different. This is so just my personality, so bear with me or skip whatever you decide. But I'm going to do a little Q&A with myself about what's going on with kind of the racial tension in our country right now, and just my perspective. I'm just me. I'm not a theologian, as I'm sure you well know. I'm not. My husband is like the closet theologian, and I am very not. But I do feel like I do have some perspectives that might be a little different, just based on who I am. And I'm seeing this from quite a few people who are biracial, that their response and interpretation of some of the things that are going on in our country are a little different than maybe the white perspective or the black perspective, because we've had the opportunity in a lot of ways to kind of be that little fly on the wall in both camps, to maybe get a different idea or a different perspective that should be considered. Unfortunately, many times when biracial people do not agree with a particular narrative, they are kind of patted on the head and told that, well, you are only half black, or oh, you are only half white, so you don't really understand. And I feel like we've had the opportunity to kind of get a glimpse into two worlds that maybe one or the other has not experienced themselves. So that's kind of where I come from as far as my perspective goes. But I'm not going to talk just about being biracial, or even primarily about being biracial. I am going to talk about, I have 12 kind of Q&A questions here that I wanted to tackle a little bit, and we'll see how it goes. All right, so the first question is, should Christians say Black Lives Matter, like hold the sign? I know there was a big uproar about the Greek archbishop who marched and was holding a sign that said Black Lives Matter. People freaked out. Or should Christians only say all lives matter? That's a really good question. Should Christians say Black Lives Matter or all lives matter? I know since the beginning of this, and even a few years ago, there's been kind of a controversy about whether or not we should use the slogan Black Lives Matter, or if we really need to emphasize that all lives matter. And as Christians, my perspective is that we are coming from the foundation that all lives matter. That is what we believe as Christians, because we believe that every man, woman, and child, period, across in the whole entire world, that we are all made in the image and likeness of God. And so therefore, we are precious, and whoever is precious to God is precious to us, and that would include everybody. So in the same way that we would, let's say if we were to, in January, the Right to Life, or the Sanctity of Life month, we remember and we declare that the lives of the unborn are important without us having to explain, well, but all lives matter, or we don't correct somebody if they say that the lives of the unborn matter, or the lives of these mothers who are carrying these precious babies who are trying to determine what to do when they find themselves pregnant. We don't have to explain any further than the lives of the unborn matter, or the lives of these mothers matter, because our foundation is that all lives matter. So in this situation where we're having a specific conversation about what may be going on in our country and specifically in the Black community, it is completely appropriate for us to say, we're having this conversation right now, and in this conversation we're talking about Black lives, and so I can unequivocally say and proclaim that Black lives matter. I can hold a sign like the bishop, the archbishop, the Greek archbishop, that so many people were up in arms about the fact that he marched, he stood in solidarity, and he held a sign that said Black Lives Matter. That was appropriate for him to say Black Lives Matter, because they do, and that's the conversation that we're having right now. Because if Black Lives Matter, then maybe some things are going to be done differently than they have been in the past. So that's where we are in the conversation. I am not a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, but I am supportive of the statement that Black Lives Matter. That's the conversation that we're having right now, and that's something that we can come together under. Why are you okay with the slogan Black Lives Matter, but are not okay with the organization, the Black Lives Matter organization? Okay, it seems like it could be kind of contradictory why I would support the statement, the proclamation that Black Lives Matter, but I would not be a proponent of the organization. Well, the organization concerns me a lot. I don't see them in the leadership condemning. They kind of neither condone nor condemn the rioting and the looting. I've seen that from some of the leadership that makes comments like, if we don't essentially get our demands met, then we're going to have to burn the system down. And that I might mean that figuratively, or we could mean that literally. So that, and then the ones that have declared that they are trained Marxists. So these are things that give me great concern, and I cannot support an organization who will not unequivocally say it is wrong to destroy and loot and be violent. That, why can't you come out and say that? So the peaceful protesters, the ones who want to be heard and should be heard and need to have a voice, that is what I support. I support that, the idea that Black people matter, that we're at the end of the place where we need to be just coming around the table and having a discussion, and action does need to be taken, but violent action does not need to be taken and should be condemned. And I'm seeing discrepancies with that in the Black Lives Matter movement, and that is the problem. Is all this just being blown out of proportion? I mean, yes, a horrendous thing happened. Everyone can agree about what happened with the George Floyd case and some other discrepancies that we've seen. But, is it really the thing that it's kind of blown up into? I do not believe all of this is being blown out of proportion, and let me tell you why. So when the first time, and I would say especially people of color, the first time people of color become aware that there are multiple colors in the world, that their skin may look different than somebody else's skin, it's usually a negative experience. I know for me, when I was little, the two situations that I remember from when I was about 5, the first one was there was a little Asian girl at school, and she informed me that we could no longer play together during recess because my dad was black. And to me, I was very confused because my skin and her skin looked the same. Our hair was different, so I had curly hair and she had straight hair, but we both had slanty eyes. I have a kind of a yellow undertone. So to me, we looked very similar. So when she pointed out that my dad was black and somehow that influenced whether or not she could play with me, it really kind of threw me off. So it was not a positive experience. For me, it was confusing more than hurtful, but it was confusing. And then also, I think the same year when I was 5, we lived in a nice neighborhood in Cupertino, California, the birthplace of Apple. And we had a cross burned into our front lawn. And our cross, it was there, we were there for a few years, and it stayed, that patch was always brown on our lawn. It was something that I remember. I didn't remember it happening exactly, but I do remember being aware of people having a problem because of the color of my dad's skin, and people having a problem with my mom because she had married somebody the color of my dad. He was a very beautiful dark brown. And yeah, so I think when that is your experience, and then you grow up, and a lot of times anything that is connected to your race when you're a person of color tends to be a negative. And then you see situations where people who look like you are being attacked or marginalized or whatever, whether it is to the extreme that it is portrayed or whatever, it can absolutely do something to you. It's traumatic because somebody who looks like me is having this done to them, and therefore I may not be safe. And that is a really big concern that people have. So, and a big trauma that a lot of people, I think, have in them and take with them. Now, whether or not I agree with the narrative that has been put out there, to the degree that it has, or to a lesser degree, or maybe it's a different narrative, whatever, as a foster parent for so many years, it doesn't really matter when you are talking about trauma. I mean, truth matters, but perspective also matters. And how we address things for somebody who's been traumatized matters. So that's important. It doesn't mean that the child who came into our home that had a fear of, I don't know, let's say they had a fear of barbecues because their parent or relative took their hand as a form of discipline and would burn it on the stove or burn it on the barbecue or something like that. You can't just say, well, for one, you're safe now and everything's okay, because why are they going to believe that? And number two, that was a specific situation that happened. All people with barbecues are not going to burn you. Are they going to believe that right away? No. Even if it is 100% true, that is not going to be believed until they have experienced it themselves. And even then, there is the great likelihood that all of their lives, they're going to have a little thing about barbecues. Okay, so it's a bigger thing than whether the narrative that is being portrayed is true or not. There is trauma that we have to take into consideration, and that is very, very important. Should we remove or destroy every statue or symbol that could be considered racist? Should we remove all statues and anything that could possibly be considered racist? I think this is where we need to come to the table and have a conversation. We do need to ask questions. Do the symbols that we have currently represent who we are as a people? And that is an important discussion for us to have. My mom made the comment a couple weeks ago about how inappropriate it would be in Germany maybe to have statues of Hitler and I can't remember his name, but that doctor who was notorious for the horrendous tortures that he and experiments that he performed on Jews in Auschwitz, or some of those high commanders that were found guilty of war crimes and all these things. Should there, how would people in Germany feel about having those kinds of statues around representing who they were as Germans? Probably not going to see that. You're probably going to see that in certain museums, because it's important for us to remember our history, but you're not going to see that as this is Hitler Square and things like that. So the discussion is important to have about whether or not these symbols that we have are still representative of who we are as a people. Should they be torn down and torched and destroyed and all this stuff? No, I don't think they should at all. I think there is a way to do things. I think people are using sometimes what's going on right now as an excuse to maybe get away with doing more destruction, and that's wrong. And that's absolutely wrong. That is not how you do things. That is not how you get heard. When my child throws a tantrum, that is not, even if they are correct about whatever is going on, when they are forceful and raging, that is not when I can hear what their need is. And I am not in no way saying Black people are children. But what I'm saying is, in this, everything for me is related to like children, because I'm a mom. But that is not when I'm even able, not just willing, but able to hear my child. Or when anybody's raging, I'm not able to hear them until we de-escalate the situation and can have a conversation, and then we can move forward from there. I also think of the Dukes of Hazzard. When I was growing up, I loved watching the Dukes of Hazzard. I had the biggest crush on Bo Duke. Oh my goodness. But one of the things that like that show and Little House on the Prairie did for me as a person of color is people of color weren't on that show very often. But when they were, the Dukes always fought for the underrepresented, the marginalized, and they fought for what was right. And sometimes when there was a person of color, the person they were fighting for, in my mind, they were fighting for me. No, I mean, shows didn't do that back then. So to cancel things like the Dukes of Hazzard, or to get rid of Gone with the Wind, is ridiculous. Gone with the Wind, first Black woman to receive the Academy Award, and we're going to toss that out because of what the content was about. It's important for us to know our history. It's important and maybe it doesn't belong in certain places or anymore, and maybe in a museum where we can explain and help people understand why there was maybe reverence or appreciation for what this Confederate person contributed, and what it was like at that time. There were also, for example, Black slave owners who fought on the side of the Confederacy, and there were reasons behind that, and Native American slaveholders and things like that. So it's not just like this white person thing that we have to get rid of. We should know all of our history, who all the players were, why all the players were playing the way they were playing, and all of what was going on. So, do we just destroy everything? No. Do we need to consider whether or not it is appropriate for it to be out in the town square, or for us to have a parade or something like that that celebrates that anymore? Does that represent our people as a country anymore? That's a good discussion to have. Should we remove a federal holiday that could be considered racist, like Columbus Day, and replace it with Juneteenth, or not? I personally think that it would be appropriate to maybe switch out some federal holidays. I don't know that that's the worst thing in the world or the biggest fight that we have right now. I think, for example, I know Columbus Day has been mentioned. I think it would be appropriate to remove Columbus Day as a federal holiday because, not because I think he was inherently racist and, whatever, because we do have to take into consideration what things were at the time, in history that we're talking about, that we didn't have the understanding and belief system that we have now. And so we live what we know. And that's what we're doing now. We live what we know. There was an exposure to, a broad range exposure to things. Anyway, not defending Christopher Columbus, but there you go. But he is not an American hero. And so I don't know that he needs to be celebrated. He had something to do with America, but or this land, but not with America, not with the United States. He didn't have anything to do with that. But Juneteenth has something very powerful and historical that shows that we as a people defended and supported this idea of the Emancipation Proclamation. That is very important for us to know about and for future generations to know about, because that has something to do with who we are and what we stand for as Americans. United, the united part is kind of important. Something, for Harriet Tubman, something for Sacagawea, something for, so there are different things that we can look at and celebrate that would still have the same value and importance of some of the other federal holidays that are celebrated, that we could potentially switch things out to be more diverse. We don't have to call everything, we don't have to call, President's Day racist. We don't have to, we don't have to freak out about all these other things, because those people, and for a lot of them, the integrity that they had, even if they didn't have the understanding of or modern beliefs about human beings exactly, they still got us on the right path to where we are today, and what we're fighting for today, and what we're maybe acknowledging their discrepancies about today. But they help to get the ball rolling. So to celebrate certain presidents is not a bad thing. They have something to do with the story of our country and where we've gotten to. And, we say all the time, we've come a long way, but we have so far to go. That's true. That's true for us as a country. And that's true for us as Christians, as individuals. As Christians, we are our whole lives. We are working out our salvation with fear and trembling. Our whole lives, we are running that race that has been set before us. We're running in such a way that we will receive the prize. And so for our country, we have not arrived. And even if we come to a consensus, and even if we fix some things now, in some way, we still will not have arrived, and there will be more to fix and more to acknowledge and more to change for generations. So anyway, there you go. Do I need to make a choice? Do I need to choose between Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter or the police? No, you do not need to choose between proclaiming the statement, not the organization, that Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter. We are coming from the foundation that all lives matter. And so if I see somebody of color who, if there's an injustice over here, I'm going to stand against that injustice, right? If a police officer, people are coming up and assaulting officers that have zero to do with some of the things that have gone on recently that people are protesting about and rioting about, that they have zero to do, or they've been like the most helpful. They don't know their story. They just know that they're a police officer, and some have been shot at point blank and killed, or are permanently damaged and disabled or whatever. And same thing in the Black community. There are police officers who assume things because of how people are dressed or what they say or the music that they're listening to or the car that they're driving or whatever. And that happens. Both are wrong. We do not have to pick which is wrong and which is right, but they're both wrong to do that. It would be wrong, and I would stand up against if there was somebody from the LGBTQ community who was being discriminated against and not allowed to buy food or not allowed to, go into a restaurant or something like that because of how they looked, I would stand against that as well. I don't condone or support the lifestyle, but everybody is made in the image and likeness of God. And therefore, if there are injustices being done to anyone, I need to say something about that. I need to do something about that. I need to not be silent and be like, well, I don't agree with so-and-so's lifestyle, or I never really liked cops, or I never really liked, this people group, or somebody did something to me when I was young, so now I don't like any of them. No, that I don't have that, I don't want to say luxury, but I don't get to do that as a Christian. I don't. That is not something I get to do because it doesn't matter. God tells us to stand up for, in the Sermon of the Mount, blessed are the poor, blessed are, all these people. We need to stand up for those who Christ loves, and that is everyone. What is the responsibility of law enforcement? How should they be responding to, the murder of George Floyd? I do believe that law enforcement has an important role to play here. I think they could make a huge difference in our country right now if they were to show loyalty, maybe in a different way than they have in the past. I know a lot of groups, and we see this with certain military groups, we see this with police officers, we see this, with, I think of the Marines. You find out somebody's a Marine and you're a Marine, it's a whole different ball game, and you can excuse a whole lot of stuff. And the same with police officer. You find out somebody's a police officer, you're a police officer, and there's, people say that, you go from being a color to being the blood, you're blue blood. So like a black person is no longer a black person. If they become a police officer, they are now blue. And that's the strongest connection that they have. Now, I am going to challenge police officers to make sure their loyalty is to the oath and not to being a police officer. Because a lot can happen as a police officer. There are good police officers and bad police officers. It's the ones who maintain and hold sacred the oath that they took to protect and serve. That is the I don't want to say club, but that is what you want to belong to. That is the part that is important. That is the elite group, is the ones, because you could be a police officer and you can be a bad police officer. We've seen it. We've seen the ones who don't really know what they're doing, or who have a chip on their shoulder. We've had ones in our house that have come in with the attitude. And we've had ones that have come into our house who have been there to protect and serve. And there is a difference. So what this elite group is that you want to be part of should be the ones who hold that oath sacred to protect and serve. And anybody who is not, any police officer who is not upholding that oath should be rejected by other police officers. Should not be a loyalty just to the badge. There is a loyalty to the oath. And that is what I think is the most important. If we can help change what the loyalty is to in law enforcement, I think that will help to weed out those who are not holding up to the oath. That will kind of take care of itself internally, that it is not enough to be united under the badge, but under the oath. So when somebody who has a badge, to be worthy of that badge, they need to raise that standard to keep that oath that has been taken sacred. Yes. And anyway, I have a lot that I can say about about that. Does that make me anti-police? Absolutely not. But police need to hold to a higher standard their own. That if you are a police officer, you are in an exclusive group that excludes anyone who's not going to live up to that oath. If somebody does that, kick them to the curb. Absolutely. Are all white people inherently racist? No, all white people are not inherently racist. I know that's going to come as a shock to people, and this may be the point where some people of color watching me may pat me on the head and send me on my way. This is the part where I talk a bit about being biracial. So I have a different perspective because I have a different experience. And I've gotten things from both sides. Black people have often tried to tell me that black people can't be racist. And my experience has been, I have received the exact same treatment from black people as I have from white people. From racist white people, I've experienced the exact same treatment from black people. And yet somehow that's not supposed to be racist. I don't know if we'll call it prejudice or bigoted, whatever, but it's something that has to do with othering me or declassifying me as black because I'm white, because I have white in me, because oh my goodness. But I have had both experiences. And so I don't just assume anybody's anything. And I tend to, when I've been around both sides who have disliked me because of the color of my skin, I have tried to understand where they're coming from. For the most part, I've tried to understand where they're coming from. When I was in high school, I lived in a town where at my high school, my friend and I essentially made up the one black person, because she was half black as well. So we made up the one black person in our school. And there weren't very many people of color in our town. There were several people who were Hispanic, but it was primarily white. And this was Paradise, California, the town that burned down, I think 2018. Everything burned down. But that's where I went to high school. And one of my dearest friends, her dad and her stepdad and mom were racist. And her stepdad used to call me her shadow. Not in a loving not in a loving way. I was her shadow. But I was also able to see that my interaction with them and their daughter started to change their perspective on black people. They grew up in a place where there were literally like no black people. There weren't any. So their experience with black people had to do with what they had heard and maybe the little that they had seen, what they had seen on the news. And of course, the news is always portraying everything that's wrong with everybody. So their experience and assumption about black people was based on something that they had never known themselves. But what I saw, there was one night that I spent the night, and that was amazing that they let me spend the night. But I spent the night at my friend's house, and I was asleep on the couch, and her mom and stepdad came in. They'd been out kind of partying a little bit with some friends, and the friends were there too, and they started making some off-color jokes about black people. And her mom stopped them and said, whoa, kind of slurring, whoa, whoa, whoa. We are not going to talk like that because my daughter's friend is black. I wasn't half black as far as they were concerned. I was black. She's black and she's a good person. So we're not going to talk like that. And so for me, I saw somebody starting to change. And not because I was mad at them or yelled at them or tried to prove them wrong. I just lived. I just lived as me. Now, does that always happen? No. People have hatred in their hearts. But on the flip side of that, I've been called a half-breed. This is from the black community. I've been called a half-breed. I've been called, told that I'm not really black. I have not lived in inner city or ghetto or anything like that. My grandmother on my black side told me that she couldn't talk to me about her life because I wouldn't understand because I was mixed and therefore I was mixed up like in the head. And that may be true, but it's not because I'm biracial. My brother, when he was in school in Cupertino again, in California, liberal California, on his school record, it said that he was special needs because his dad was black and his mom was white. So because he was biracial, he was special needs. Now that was white. That was the white thing. On the black side, I've been told that my mom's a whore because she married a black man. I've been, told that my opinion, who I am, doesn't count because I'm only half black. Not taking into consideration that I still would have, if we go back to that time period, I still would have been a slave. I still would have been sold. I still probably would have been abused and raped because I had the lighter skin. But nobody likes to talk about that. Anyway, but being white does not mean that you're racist. What you do with who you are determines what you are, whether you are racist or not. But being white does not classify you as racist. On my white side, nobody owned slaves. Nobody owned slaves. We were not that side of the family was not part of what was going on with slavery. And historically, there were obviously white slave owners. There were black slave owners. There were Native American slave owners. Yeah. Anyway, so that's my perspective. No, if you are white, you are not automatically a racist. That would be like saying because I'm part black or because I'm black that I'm automatically inherently a thug. Do I need to apologize for being white? No, you do not need to apologize for being white. There was not a button inside the womb that said, white, black, choose which one. This one has privilege, this one doesn't. And if you were weak, you chose the white one because you wanted to have privilege. And if you were stout-hearted, you chose the black. I mean, come on. You do not have to apologize for who God made you. I always think back, my favorite little song when I was a kid was, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black and white, they're precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children, all of the world. And that has always been my perception of God. So if God has called all of those things good, all of who we are, the pigmentation that we have or lack thereof. I have a friend, she was white or red. If she tanned, she didn't tan, she was red. She was either pink or white. Anyway, but He made her skin and it's beautiful. He made my skin. And I always like to think of me as, my family is kind of like a Twix bar. My dad was the dark chocolate, my mom was the white cookie crunch, and I was the caramel. That's a good thing. It was a good thing. And the other reason I don't want there to be an apology, or don't think there should be, is, it's primarily because your color is not bad. It's not something that should be apologized for. Maybe there have been policies that have been made that we need to stand against, or, if you see somebody suffering and you can do something about it because of how you look, wherever you happen to be, what culture you're from, what color you are, what tribe you're from, what class you're from, make a difference. But don't apologize for being you. For you. You're beautiful. Beautiful. At least on the outside, be beautiful on the inside too. That's the part that's important. Not to be colorblind. I think of the artists that we love so much. They have found ways to incorporate colors and mix colors to reflect just incredible beauty or light or depth, richness because of color. And that's kind of how we should view things when it comes to our pigmentation. What about black on black violence or black on black crime? Black on black crime and violence is absolutely something that needs to be part of the discussion and part of the doing, part of what we're looking at when we're discussing race issues, which I hate the whole race thing. I hate the whole race thing because we are human. Our race is human. So our ethnicities or our cultures, that's what we're talking about right now. So when we see problems in any community, that should be addressed, and that should be part of the discussion that we're having, and the effort that we are our efforts to change discrepancies that we see in certain communities. That needs to be part of what's going on too, because if we are saying Black Lives Matter, which they do, then we need to look at it from all the different perspectives. It doesn't only matter if it's, white against black, or if they're, or, some other combination, rich against poor. That doesn't matter if there are also issues going on within a particular community. Those need to be addressed as well. But we should not say, well, they're killing each other, they're killing themselves, they're doing all this, that, and the other thing, and therefore we don't need to take responsibility for maybe the discrepancies or injustices that are going on over here. That is foolish. We should not ignore what's going on over here because this also is going on. We need to discuss all of it. We need to address all of it. We need to make changes so that we can learn and grow and rise up instead of fixing, putting a Band-Aid on I think of somebody in a war. So if we're talking specifically about the Black community right now, there are potentially mortal wounds from some situations that are going on right now that we're discussing that is causing so much of an uprise. But on the other hand, if we don't address the mortal wounds that are going on within the community, the patient's still going to die. So all of it needs to be addressed. Not just one or the other. We can't say, well, take care of the Black on Black. We have a bleeding wound here. The patient's going to bleed out if we don't care for and address all the bleeding wounds that are going to cause the patient to die. We have to address it all. We have to address it all. What is my responsibility as a Christian? How should I respond to all this? Our responsibility as Christians is to love. We are coming from a place. Jesus told us to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Our neighbor, who is our neighbor? Everyone is our neighbor. So if we are loving everyone, if everyone is our neighborhood, then we need to be loving to everyone. We don't need to be judging and yelling and all of that. That's not to say that if it comes up in conversation, what do you believe? And do you agree and support my position on this, that, or the other thing? We can speak the truth in love. The in love part is very important. But much of the time, we're not called to do that. We're called to be loving towards others. We're called to help. We're called to serve. We're called to be humble. We're called to be silent. We're called to listen. I think of the Father Arseni book. He served the people who abused him. There's a guy in there who is, violent with him. They didn't just ignore this little priest. He was violent towards him. And when he got sick, this horrible guy who was planning on killing Father Arseni, when he got sick, Father Arseni helped him. He cleaned him. He fed him. He gave some of his own food to him so that he would be able to recover. That is our job. That is what we are called to. Not to prove that we're right, not to prove anything, but to love. Again, that does not mean that I am condoning any lifestyle or saying that any action is correct. And if it comes up in love, if I'm the one who's supposed to say something to somebody, I will. The Lord would really have to show me that I need to say this thing to this person. But my primary thing is to be the way we are when there's an emergency, when the flooding in Texas, people from all over the place were coming with their boats to rescue people who are stranded on their rooftops. When they got to those people who were stranded, they did not say, what is your political view? Who did you vote for? What is your identity? Do you go to church? What church do you go to? What denomination? Are you even a Christian? They didn't have a criteria for helping the people who needed help. And that is our job as Christians. If there are injustices, we need to help. It doesn't matter who the injustices are against. We need to help. We need to humble ourselves. We need to listen. And we need to be the hands and the feet and the love of Christ in our homes, in our churches, in our community, in our country, and in the world. Thank you so much for listening. This is probably the longest one I've done, but it matters. You matter. We all matter. So let's keep working at our salvation one moment at a time. Thanks.